Hi, I'm Anirudh Tiwathia. I'm a scientist at the Rare Entertainment Lab, and I'm going to talk to you about how climate stories impact audiences at home. And okay, so climate storytelling has really captured the zeitgeist. We see tons of media attention, we see industry buy-in, we see a groundswell of enthusiasm from creative professionals, whether that's script writers or set designers or showrunners, to include climate solutions in big ways and small in the entertainment we already know and love. But critically, what we're seeing is audiences are on board. In study after study that we've run, we see 7 in 10 Americans want more climate-friendly behaviors on screen, specifically in order to inspire large-scale climate action. But does it matter? And by that I mean, does it matter beyond documentaries? And to answer that question, I'm going to bring some evidence from a case study that we ran using a TV show called Madam Secretary, and specifically an episode called The New Normal. Okay, I absolutely love this episode. I'm very partial. It is a hard-hitting episode, it is fast-paced drama, and it features climate as central to its storyline. There is a climate-fueled super typhoon on its way to hit a coral island nation in the Pacific called Nauru, and the Secretary of State has to figure out a way to relocate the entire population before the typhoon gets there. It touches on climate justice, touches on climate migration, it touches on government action, and the role and responsibility of high-emitting nations like the US. And so, since we wanted to know how viewing such a storyline would impact audiences, what we did was run a randomized controlled trial. Participants were either asked to randomly assigned to either watch the climate episode or the episode right prior. And because we were interested in the impact over time, we measured people at 4 points. 3 days prior to viewing to get a baseline measure, immediately after viewing, 3 days later, or 10 to 15 days later. Well, what did we find? Okay, so immediately after viewing, we see a big boost in climate concern. That's both in terms of the perceived threat that climate change poses, the severity of that threat, and also worry about how climate change might impact me, my family, and my community. We also see increase in support for government action to combat climate change. But the part that sticks out to me is this bottom set of variables. Let's consider them dimensions. The reason I find these variables particularly interesting is one, they're really hard to move. And what we saw was that when people watched this episode, it boosted their belief in the unequal impacts of climate change across a bunch of unequal impacts of climate change across nations. It increased support for compensating vulnerable countries. Think of this as climate reparations. It increased their support for accepting climate migrants and for providing both emergency aid and creating a resilience fund to help at-risk nations protect themselves. Now, these are really hard to message on issues. These are boring, dry, difficult, abstract issues. And what we see here and why I really love this is the unique power of entertainment. Through character and storyline, we can bring these abstract issues up close and personal and let people feel the suffering and the actual risk that people in distant countries are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Okay, that was immediately after viewing. Well, what about over time? So there was a dip 3 days after viewing, but the good news is even 10 to 15 days later, a lot of those climate justice variables were still elevated relative to baseline. So what we see is not only do we see an impact immediately after viewing, but that impact persists for at least 10 to 15 days later. And the part that really excites me, the odds of self-identifying as a single issue climate voter were 3 times higher immediately after viewing and twice as high even 10 days later. Okay, so that was the case study. Can we step back and generate some abstract principles about what good storytelling or good climate storytelling or impactful climate storytelling should do? Okay, one, if you're going to have characters, you may as well have them do climate-friendly actions. Whether that's driving an EV or eating plant-rich or installing solar, audiences at home notice what characters are doing on screen and use that as a cue for what they think is normal, expected, and where the future is headed. Break some stereotypes. Climate action is for absolutely everyone. So make sure that the people taking climate action in your stories look like the diverse world we inhabit and let audiences at home see themselves on screen. There's no one reason to engage with climate. It is an intersectional issue, whether it's protecting your children, whether it is protecting your neighborhood, or whether it's the fight for racial justice. Pick the pathway that resonates with your audience, but most critically, pick the pathway that is authentic to the character that you're writing. And finally, don't feel the need to write perfect characters. Hypocrisy is the price of entry. Show your characters struggling and let them fight to overcome barriers. When we see other people struggling and overcoming barriers, it makes us feel like we can do it too. The last thing I'd like to leave you with is that entertainment and impact are not in conflict. Quite the contrary. Entertainment value is critical to impact. Stories that transport us and characters that we fall in love with are the pathways to impact and changing the climate story that we have inhabited. Thank you.